What is up? What is up? This is Pastor Mike over here from Pursuing Faith Network. I hope you guys are having a good one. I am just starting out right now, and man, I hope you're enjoying your time. Listen, we're going to be coming in with questions and stuff. In the meantime, as we're waiting and stuff, I'm going to be reacting to some stuff. So why don't we just go ahead and get things started? My name is Mike. I'm a pastor. I happen to be a teacher, so I get summers off. And that's always fun, I guess. One of the things that I enjoy the most about being able to be doing what I get to do is I get to spend a lot of time with my daughter. On top of that, just over the last few weeks, my daughter and we actually went on this trip to Tennessee. It was a great trip. We actually got to meet a lot of people, but the nature of this trip was twofold. On one side, we actually attempted to first bond, right? So we wanted to go all the way up through Florida. We wanted to make our way up and just get to hang out with some of our friends. We went over to Genie Springs. Then we went over to my aunt's house, which was fun. Then on top of that, we also got to go to Stone Mountain. And so all of this, we were driving, and it was fun. And then we made our way up to a little town that's called Dahlonega, which is where you get to mine for gold and stuff. And so I thought that was great. Now, if you've never been to any of those places, I highly encourage you to go. It's a lot of fun. Now, one of the things that I do want to encourage you to do right now is if you're watching this after the fact, make sure you leave a like and subscribe and share. Like I said, my name is Mike. I'm a pastor. And right now, I'm going to be taking in questions as they come in. And so if you're watching this right now as we go, you can start submitting your questions. You can actually call the number. Oop, I just realized I never actually activated the phone number on this side over here. So let me go ahead and get that started. But in the meantime, after I did that, there you go. I'm receiving calls now. It's good to go. In the meantime, one of the things that I ended up doing with my daughter was beyond bonding is we then took a second part of that trip and we made it over to Tennessee. And in Tennessee, we actually did a short mission trip. We were actually leading in a like a VVS kind of style for little children that are Afghani refugees, and then the parents were actually learning English. And so all we did was we told them some Bible stories, and we made some really good connections. But the point of it for me to go with my daughter, by the way, my daughter is 7 years old. And so the reason why I went with her was because I wanted her to know some of the different cultures in our world. And in fact, we actually also ended up going to a Hindu temple that's in Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee. So I thought that was neat. It was interesting seeing her smile, and then at the same time, like, just be weirded out. I was like, whoa, what are people doing over here with with all these shrines and stuff. And so it was a great conversation. But as we're waiting and stuff, I'm wondering if there is, as you guys are watching right now, what might be some of the things that are going on in your life that might be maybe worthy of you asking questions about. So I wonder if maybe there might be a pressing question in your heart. Maybe there's something, I don't know, maybe you're an atheist, maybe not, maybe you've just been struggling as a follower of Jesus. Maybe you've been experiencing what's known as church hurt, whatever that might be. But just leave that in the comments. I'll be happy to answer questions as we go. Or you can call the number that you see on the screen and we can have a conversation. Don't worry, I'll keep you anonymous. You don't have to worry about putting your name out there into the world. Although, I mean, I would ask you for your first name, though, but that's about it. The point is to be able to bring these up because I know that oftentimes there might be questions that come up late at night. And listen, I'm excited that you tuned in, that you're watching right now instead of actually doing something else on social media. This is what you're doing. So phenomenal. Listen, this might be your sign. Hey, I need to stop. I need to ask some questions. There's been something pressing in my heart. So I wonder what that might be for you. If you just want to leave a comment, say hi. We'd love to get to know what it is that God has put in your heart, or maybe what it is that's pressing in your heart, or maybe, this is Christianese language. I don't know why we say that in church world, but as they come in, make sure that you kind of hang out, because I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this for. It might be last time I did this for an hour and I thought it was only going to be for 20 minutes. So, and I can only do these whenever my family goes back to sleep. And so right now we're trying to figure things out. And so all that said and done, I mean, like I said, I'm a pastor. I'm a co-host for the Pursuing Faith Network. And look, I love being able to answer all kinds of questions. It's part of what I do, both as a pastor and as a Bible teacher, is we get to go through some of the most difficult questions that, the Bible has to ask us, like, why does God allow evil in the world? Or where's the Garden of Eden? Those are the typical questions that I get. One of the reasons why I want to do this is because I'm so tired of seeing all these people that are going online on social media who claim to be deconstructionists, and they claim to go and say that they were once Christians, but then they kind of gave up and they saw something that made sense to them. It's like every single argument that I've ever heard from anyone saying why they stopped believing is actually a very faulty argument. And I have not ever heard anyone with an honest question actually say, yep, and that's it. And so it's more of a choice that people make to say, you know what, I'm just done. I mean, that to me, that's a choice. I mean, imagine if you are a detective and you're trying to find out if the person is innocent or guilty. And so you say, well, you know what, I'm not going to consider that evidence. That evidence to me is no longer valid. And so I would just say that person who's doing the investigation is not doing a good job. And so I think half the time when I talk to people like that, they don't actually consider all the relevant data. They just make a decision. But anyway, you can ask me anything. You can put it on the comments. I would love to see it over here. I've got, horizontal, vertical. We're trying to figure things out as we go. But if you're watching and you're staying tuned with me, make sure that you say hi. So what's up? But in the meantime, maybe there's one more thing that I would like to add. When I went on this mission trip with my daughter, again, she's 7. One of the things that I told her that she was going to be experiencing is that since these kids that we're going to be ministering to are not followers of Jesus, they're probably going to be saying all kinds of absurd things like cursing her out or giving her the middle finger, which they ended up happening. And my daughter, like I said, she's very sweet. She's never experienced any kind of hatred, any kind of hate talk, any kind of hate speech, whatever you want to call that. And when I was prepping her for that, I told her, look, that might happen. That's going to happen. And in fact, it did happen. But I told her, before that happens, I want you to know that you need to be remembering that the biggest problem that these children have is not that they gave you a middle finger. It's not that they're cursing at you. The biggest problem they have is that they don't know Christ. And so when they do that to you, what you need to do is you need to stop. You need to pray for them. And so my daughter did. She, in fact, prayed for them. And so, again, she's a 7-year-old and she was doing this. And so that was encouraging to me. Again, this was while we were in Tennessee ministering to families that are from Afghani refugees. And so I say this in a world in which, we live in America. And in America right now, everyone is who claims to be a Christian is saying that Muslims are here to take over and stuff. And so I actually got to meet families face to face, and I got to meet the heart of what's going on. And something I got to learn from the ministers that are there, the Christian believers that used to be Muslims that are ministering to these families, they expressed to me that one of the reasons why many Muslims, when they get to this country, they double down on their faith. First, in their countries, it's mostly cultural and not so much piety per se, but when they got here, because they've lost everything, they've lost all their friends, they've lost all their connections, they've lost their language, they've lost everything. Now they're here in the country, and the only thing they can hold on to, their culture, is their religion. And so then they double down on their religion. And so because where they come from, they are taught to be very suspicious of Christians. What ends up happening is when a Christian approaches a Muslim and then tells them, we don't want you here, then that settles it for them. Or maybe it's on the opposite side. Maybe because they grow up also knowing that Christians want to proselytize, or we might say evangelize. The way that they register that is that Christians want to change you instead of Christians want to know you. And so what I came to learn is that this is such a great culture to be able to become friends with, because they actually welcome you. And so, hey, Seth, how you doing? I don't know how long the lag is, but I see that you are checking us out live from the vertical chat over here. You're saying, what's up? And so let me see if I can make this happen. There you go. You said hi. Look at that. I'm trying to learn it. So now you help me out. Look, it's right on my forehead over here. But maybe it's going back on this setting. But I just want to say hi to any single one of you guys who are watching. And I want to encourage you guys that as you guys are thinking about those questions, again, I'm gonna just kind of prepare you for some of them. Maybe you're thinking, well, why does God allow evil into the world? That might be a good question. Why does God allow suffering in the world? Does the end justify the means? Those are the typical questions that people ask. But maybe it might be something else. Like, I don't know how to feel God in a moment in my life in which I'm just very dry. So yeah, Seth, I mean, I think that having conversations with different people that have no understanding of the Christian faith is important, and also important for Christians to know the other side. Again, I just want to remind you that having conversations with people from the opposite religion, or whatever that even means, it doesn't mean that you're embracing that, but rather it's helpful for you to be able to understand them, because at the end of the day, you're not speaking to an ideology, you're speaking to a person. And so that's a really, really, really good question. Over here we got immortal beloved. Let me see if I can put that over here. We got, why did God murder babies? What a wildly important question to ask. I mean, let's go ahead and start framing it properly. And if you want to, you can call in and we can have a conversation. The number is right there. It's a 786-373-8885. But what we want to ask when we're asking such a question is, first of all, what is murder? We start out with knowing that the word murder and the word kill are not the same word, right? So let me put that comment back up on the screen. This is the question that's being asked right now. So murder is the unjustified taking of a life, whereas killing is not the unjustified taking of a life. Now, that doesn't, I don't want to massage the text. There are moments, and I'm assuming you're calling to attention when God commands Joshua and the armies to, go out and take over the land of the Amalekites, and so then to take out everyone. I mean, you can go ahead and say, yes, that's what I'm talking about. That way we can actually address that issue. But one of the things that many Christians, when we try to answer questions like this, is that we say, oh, well, but that was then and this is now. And I think that's a cop-out to the actual weight of the question. And so it is true. God commanded Joshua's armies to take out the Amalekites and their land and everyone, and not let any single person survive, not even the children. And so you wonder, well, why would God allow something like that happen? What is up with that? I mean, I would never do that. Why would God not only allow, but why would he command that to happen? That is a great question. So the way that you want to ask that question has to be in light of who we are in relationship to who God is. So it is true that you and I as humans, we should never want to kill a single human being. Maybe immortal beloved, maybe you and I are on the same level there. Would you also be on the same level as to say that even taking of the innocent of those who are in the womb, would you say that's also evil? Or would you say, no, that's not evil? And so there you're already seeing that there might be a discrepancy in our understanding of what good and evil is. But let's just put that aside and let's just say, why would God command that? So the people of the Amalekites, the people that were living in that area, they had hundreds of years, 400 years to get their act together. They had done something. The passages in the scripture say that it was because they had betrayed Abraham's descendants in a situation that happened back in I think it's Genesis. I forget what chapter it is right now. But so a situation had happened in which they betrayed Abraham's offspring. And so then they got into a situation where now God was not going to tolerate them. But again, that's the starting point. What we need to know is that we only have what we have. We also know that these are from archaeological records. We know that every single nation surrounding Israel, even the very Israelites themselves, they were given into worship of false idols. And so their acts of worshiping of false idols involved even the sacrificing of children. And so you could imagine for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, these are nations that are just doing despicable acts. And so then God uses Israel as an instrument of judgment against the Amalekites. Yes, and that includes even their children, even everyone. So judgment is coming from God onto everyone. Now, the second question that you might ask is, well, what happened to those children? What happened to them? Did they make it to heaven? Did they make it to hell? Are they going to be tormented forever in eternity? Because that might be the second half of the question. See, the sins of the fathers and the sins of the parents ended up in the death of every single person in that region. There's an example in Joshua chapter 8 where a man, his name is Achan, and he takes something that didn't belong to him. And he took from he took possession of something that should have been burned after the Israelites had won a victory, and so he kept it. He hid it, and so then Joshua, and you see everybody's like looking for the right person, and so finally the person steps up and is like, "Yep, it was that guy." What is the call? You might ask. Well, it's for him to be killed and for his family and everyone to be killed. Why? Why? Well, that's how seriously God takes holiness, and so the fact that people are going against holy God and doing whatever they think is right in their own eyes and thinking that there's never going to be a consequence, that lets you know how skewed we are in reality. And so when we ask a question like the one that was asked a moment ago, which was, why did God murder babies? Again, that is, the question is not framing reality adequately. But when we read those passages, we should also not just read them and be like, oh, well, God is God, and so of course he's going to do that. That would have been a tragic moment. And so the Bible, what I love about the Bible is that it doesn't shy away from the tragic moments. And yes, God is using Israel as an instrument of judgment against the Amalekites for the sins of the fathers and for all, and when I say fathers, I mean even previous generations. Why? They had not repented. They had not turned their ways. And that lets you know how seriously God takes sin. But where do those babies end up? Now, there's a guy, his name is Adam Harwood. Harwood. He is a professor in the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I've corresponded with him a few times. I read a book of his called The Spiritual Condition of Infants. I highly encourage you to read that book. In his book, he actually goes against Wayne Grudem's position on how we can't know what happens to babies when they die. Wayne Grudem wrote Systematic Theology. It's actually that book that I have right here, Systematic Theology. And so in this book right here, Wayne Grudem says, well, the secret things belong to the Lord, right? Like Deuteronomy 29:29. So we can't know why exactly or what exactly happened. What happens to babies when they die, or why exactly it is that God would allow that situation happen with the Amalekites. But specifically to the spiritual conditions of infants, Adam Harwood actually says that, well, we do have enough evidence in the Bible to let us know that at the very least, infants would not actually encounter any kind of judgment from God in the eternal sense. Now, all of us experience death out of the consequence of sin. So notice that no one ever had to teach you and I how to sin. All of us have been sinning since the day that we were able to have a conversation with someone. So, I remember I recorded when I was journaling one time, my daughter, I think she was 2, and she broke a microphone. And I asked her who broke it. And she was sitting right next to me. And she said, oh, one of the dogs broke it. I was like, dude, you broke it. Like, why are you telling me that? No one has to teach us how to sin. Sin is our spiritual condition. That's the way that Adam Harwood starts. But the question becomes, does God judge the nature of our sinful nature, or does God judge our sinful actions? And is there an age of accountability? So the Bible doesn't actually say if there's an age of accountability, but at least there's a moment in Numbers and also in Deuteronomy chapter 4 where it records the instance in which those who were under the age of 20 were spared from the judgment of having betrayed God by giving themselves over to idolatry. So they were deserving of wrath, and instead God showed them mercy. But at least that lets us know that in God's infinite wisdom, he can bestow his grace upon those whom he deems accountable or not accountable. Now, I would not put that to the test of myself. I would not say, oh, it's at the age of 20 or it's at the age of 15. In Adam Harwood's book, The Spiritual Condition of Infants, he actually addresses several passages. One of them is in Ezekiel 38, verse 18, which he talks about how there will come a day when the sins of the fathers will not be held against the sins, against their children. And so that, again, that kind of ties back into this whole question that came up earlier. Why did God murder babies? But that is, again, that question is a loaded question. It's actually, if I were to give you the proper definition of what you're doing in that question, the question itself is fallacious because it is a loaded premise. And so you're saying that God is murdering when we have already established that God cannot murder because murder is the unjustified taking of a life and nothing that God does is unjustifiable. So then the question might be, why would God order that the Israelites wipe out everyone, including babies? Why would God, send that to happen? And is that murder or is that justifiable? So that's the second part of the question. But I mean, it's an excellent question to ask. I would not shy away from that. Now, is that a question that might prevent you from worshiping God, or is that a question that prevents you from saying, well, I am not sure who would worship a God that would do that? But then again, I would push that question back to you and say, well, where do you get your morality from? Because you would need an absolute to hold morality. And if morality is all based on preferences, and if it's based on evolutionary processes, then we have no reason for us to call something good or call something evil outside of survival. So if survival is what is best, then why would I call something bad if whatever I'm doing is to survive? And if my survival, is affected by your survival in any way, shape, or form negatively, then I would have to do what I have to do because, again, survival of the fittest. And so, again, it's not a straw man argument if you think about it, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're putting one worldview versus another worldview. And anytime that a worldview that's atheistic tries to make a moral claim against a Christian worldview over here, then what ends up happening is the atheistic worldview is going to inevitably borrow from the Christian worldview on basis of morality. But what questions do you have regarding your questions about God? I mean, I'm here to help you out. I'm here to try to make sense of them, but I'm going to tell you, I'm not God. I'm not the Holy Spirit. There might be things that I don't know, and that's okay. Now, I'm a master of divinity. I have a master of divinity from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. All that means is that I've read a few more books than some people. I've read the Bible several times, cover to cover, and let's see, I'm a Bible teacher. Like I said, yes, I've studied Greek. I've studied the Hebrew, but all in all, what you want to find out about your spiritual condition with God is, am I holding these questions up against him, or am I actually honestly seeking him? And so for Immortal Beloved, thank you so much for that question. Again, I'm going to go ahead and put it up over here one more time and just kind of highlight it. Immortal Beloved asked that question, why did God murder babies? And as I've said, that's a loaded premise of a question, because murder by definition means the unjustified taking of life. God is just, and so God cannot murder, but God can take a life, and it would not be murder because he is God, and so he is just. He is the giver of life. He can take life away, and so why would God allow, or why would God order the Israelites to go into the Amalekites? Well, that's obvious. That's because God was using the Israelites as an instrument of judgment against the Amalekites. But that's not the hardest question that I've heard, but it's definitely a hard question, because you're wrestling within yourself. It's like, I don't know how I could let myself in a situation be like that. Like, you try to put yourself in the shoes of Israel as they're going out into the Amalekites. And what we also know is that they also did not take everyone. They, like the passages tell us, that they did not end everyone's life. And yeah, that was an act of disobedience on their behalf. And it's also, I think that it's great that the Bible highlights that. See, what I like about the Bible is that it doesn't shy away from the problem of evil. It doesn't shy away from the problem of the human experience, and it doesn't try to sanitize everyone. So like you go from Abraham to David to Solomon, and just about every single person you might find, there's always something that they did wrong. Israel was constantly doing things wrong. God had chosen Israel, and yet Israel kept betraying Israel. And that's also true of us as followers of Jesus. We have been chosen by Christ. We have turned ourselves over to him and surrendered to him, and yet we struggle with sin. And like Paul says in Romans chapter 7, that which I want to do, I end up not doing, and that which I don't want to do, I end up doing. And so that is, it's kind of like the biggest call of the struggle is real. But once again, if you are watching this and you might want to leave a question or a comment, I'm here for you. I want to help you guys out, answer these questions. I know that part of the challenge is I don't want to ask a question that makes me feel, like dumb. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Look, you might be an atheist, and that's okay. I encourage you, be here instead of being at some other site, because half of the time what ends up happening is if you go on social media, you keep scrolling, you have all these guys that are just mocking, and they're not actually giving real questions. And people that are calling in, when they call in, they're just being called to get roasted, because the person who is on this side of the line, they don't care what you have to say. They don't care at all. All they care about is that they're getting people staying glued here. But if you actually have a legitimate question about God, about why God lets bad things happen, or maybe about, I've been trying to understand this passage in Scripture. It doesn't make any sense. I was reading this the other day, and it made absolutely no sense to me. I was reading in Deuteronomy 22. Something didn't make sense. It just didn't resonate with me. Or why is it that when I read the Old Testament stuff, doesn't happen? And so I wonder if maybe you, as you're having these kinds of questions, there are things going on resonating in yourself that you might be wondering, well, maybe, just maybe, I don't know everything there is to know. And so look at that. All of this, for some reason, I had no idea that the chat kept going up and blowing up. I'm looking at the chat right now, and more ideas are also inherently subjective. Saying this is a non-Christian. I don't think. Let me see. Let me kind of scroll back up. Am I well versed in? Look at this. I'm sorry, guys. This thing is not uploading as fast as you might wish. But I'm seeing here. Let's see. Okay. Well versed in Christian theology or philosophy? Probably more theology than philosophy, to be honest with you. Let's see. What else? God is infinite logic and infinite power, therefore infinite choices. Infinite choices. This one's a very deeply philosophical question. I mean, you might be getting into some string theory stuff in that. What an interesting thing over here to be kind of diving into. But the idea that God has infinite choices, what does that even mean? God has... in Ephesians chapter 1, we read, it says that since eternity past, he had chosen and he had predestined. And so what does that mean? That means that anything that could have been, would have been. Maybe I don't know if you're familiar with Molinism. I'm not a fan of Molinism, but they provide some neat ideas. In Molinism, Molina said that there's this middle knowledge that God has, which is interesting. I mean, I like to play with that idea. Again, I'm not a fan of the idea per se, but it's a good idea. So there's this passage in Matthew, I believe it's chapter 11, where Jesus is giving these series of woes. Like, woe to you, Chorazin, for if I had performed these miracles in Sodom, they would have repented. And so think about what that means for a moment. That means if it's middle knowledge, then what that means is that God knows that if he had come down in the incarnate and as Christ in flesh, and he had performed the same miracles he had performed where he was at in Jerusalem and in Chorazin and in all these other places, that the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, they would have repented. That's one way to interpret that. Another way to interpret that is that he was being hyperbolic. Either way, you have that. And so, let's see. We got God needs to be placed in a care home. Well, but you think about this. If what you're saying is true, then what all you're showing, unfortunately, immortal beloved, is that you haven't actually taken God seriously. From your perspective, what you're thinking is that God is made up, that God is just whatever we all think about. But I mean, I feel for you, immortal beloved, because on your side, you are wrestling with a lot of questions, but it's like you've chosen not to try to look for the answer. You've just already decided, this is my opinion of who God is, but I haven't decided to look at the bigger picture. Like, I haven't decided to see, well, hold up. God didn't have to make me. God didn't have to make anything. Yet he made me. He made everything. He made everyone. And Adam and Eve, they could have not sinned, but they sinned. And God could have ended the line right then and there, and I still would not have been born, because God, okay, that's it, it's done. Because he said, surely you shall die if you eat of this fruit. And yet he still showed them mercy. He still dressed them, and he still let them be fruitful and multiply. And why? Why would God do something like that? Well, it all boils down to this notion of not free will, but God's greater glory. And what I mean by that is this: it's like, how great is God? God is so great that he is able to and willing to forgive me when I sin. Now think about this. Had I never sinned, had sin never entered the world, would we be able to say that God is great? Absolutely. How great is he? He is so great that he would forgive me of my sins? Well, wait a second. I've never sinned. There's no way for me to know that. No one's ever sinned. There's no way for anyone to know that. And so as you can see, that is the notion of it all. But man, you guys are going at it. Let's see. What do we have over here? And you guys, Seth and Immortal Beloved, you guys are going at it back and forth. I see that. The best I can do is help you guys understand that when you guys are having a conversation about God, whenever you're having a conversation about God, you need to understand that if you're coming at it from a position that I know better than, then you've already lost any kind of ground, because no one would ever in any situation say, I know everything that there is to know about anything. Like, if I've already decided that I'm just going to bring back to this idea of evidence. If I, as an investigator, have already decided that, someone, because of their skin color or because of their age, has committed a crime, and I just can't see why something like that would happen, then I'm not going to even bother investigating any kind of relative evidence. No, because in my mind, I know that this person is guilty, because I would never do whatever that is. I'll give you an example. Suppose you have, you hear of a man, he cuts or he stabs the heart of a child. Now, right now you're thinking, okay, that is a bad thing. But if I give you more information, your perspective is going to change. That man that's stabbing that heart of that child is actually a surgeon, and he's opening the heart of that child, and he's going to do open heart surgery. See, now that you have more information, now you're able to quickly change your mind about the original position that I gave you, which was a man stabbed a kid in the heart. Well, if all I gave you was that information and didn't bother saying anything, can you imagine that doctor is like, Your Honor, this man stabbed a child in the heart, and I would never do that. It's like the judge would say, well, hold up, but he was performing surgery. And so you see, you and I don't lack the capacity to actually give an understanding that is bad judgment, to say, well, if the judge were to say, yeah, that guy's guilty, and relevant evidence. And the more evidence you have, the more you find out it supports what you let me see what you end up kind of what do we got going on over here? Oh, there you go. I thought I lost you guys for a moment. So you end up having more evidence in support of God's existence, but not only God's existence. I go a little bit further than that, because all of these theistic proofs are one thing, but I I challenge people to think a little bit more about this. And so if you're struggling with, or if you're challenging the existence of God because of morality, point the mirror back at you. Just do it, because I'm going to be honest with you. As a pastor, I've also had my share of questions. I've had my share of doubts. I've had my share of insecurities. Like the question that was asked earlier, I've wrestled with that too. So I'm not out here coming at it with a high horse thinking, oh yeah, I got it. I know exactly what I'm doing. Like, I made my decision. That's it. It's done. No, I actually sat down and I looked at the evidence, and I looked at what you would call all the relevant data. And when you consider, okay, everything that we say, whenever we say a word like morality, if you're saying that Christians are morally subjective because God is subjective, or what I mean, I've heard that argument. That is a wild argument to me, because all that shows is that there is a lack of understanding on objectivity and subjectivity. That is that's actually an old argument. I forget the name of the myth, or not the name of the myth, but the name of the dilemma. But I think it was does God love the pious because they're pious, or are they pious because God loves them? I think that's the way it goes. And so that argument was debunked hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And so to say that God is subjective, or that because God calls something good, then, or as if God is saying, well, I like that, that's good, or I don't like that, that's not good, then that's not understanding what good and bad is. See, good is good because it comes out of God's character. It's not that God thinks, I think I like this one, that's good. Like that would be God being capricious. We are capricious. We like things one day, and then the next day, you know what? I don't like Sundays anymore. I like gelato instead. And that's not the same thing. See, God calls good because he himself is good. And so when he decrees something to be good is rather out of who he is. And so what is good? That which glorifies God, right? That which brings glory to God is good. What is good? That which is absent of evil, that which is perfect, that which is holy, that which is pure, that which is imperishable, that is good. What is evil? Evil cannot be a dictionary definition. Evil has to be something more than that, because if all evil is the definition, if a definition from the dictionary, like, oh, evil is, like when someone does something bad, or maybe we can look up the actual definition of evil on the internet. Let's see, dictionary right here. Let's see. Okay, and let's see, which one is this one? That's not it. Which one is it? Let's see, can I get something from anyone? Of course, I'm having a challenge over here trying to even put these up. This is the first time that I try to kind of come up with one of these, but I'm just looking up the definition. It says morally reprehensible, sinful, wicked, and evil. And then it starts giving different uses of the word. Then arising from actual or imputed bad character or conduct, that's evil. Causing discomfort or repulsion, causing harm, marked by misfortune. Okay. Evil. Let's go, internet. That's a good question. Are all beliefs true? Let's see over here. Are all beliefs true? Another one. And I've got Seth over here going, nope. Well, let's go back here for just a moment. If all beliefs are true, then nothing is true. And if nothing is true, then I'm not even here. Okay, that's a really bad argument. But every single world religion is trying to make a truth claim. And so I'm looking at more comments coming in. So Buddhists, for example, they say that you are going to get rid of evil when you stop desiring. Like, evil is that which is evil comes out of desire, out of greed, out of anything. So you would stop experiencing evil the moment you stop desiring. That is a Buddhist position. That is like the heart of Buddhism, because Buddhism doesn't look at outside deities. Buddhism looks at the self. Hinduism, they claim that there's one ultimate being, but there's these other extensions of that being in different ways, shapes, and forms, and different incarnations and stuff. And so even though you have, was it Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, it's like outside of that, you have all these devas and whatnot. So how can you determine, let me see over here. Great. Now you can determine, wait. Now you can determine are true and which are false. Oh, let's see. Maybe kind of get into that. So again, are we moving past the fact that everyone is making a truth claim? So that's probably the first step, right? Then once we understand that everyone is making a truth claim, then the second step that we have to make is, well, everyone is making a truth claim. Which one is true? And the way that we might define which one is true is you might do it from below, or you might do it from above. The problem with doing it from above is that, well, if you're Hindu and you're Buddhist or you're whatever, then you're already starting from a set of presuppositions over here. You say, no, this is what God told me. This is what my deity told me. Right? So you could start from below. I like to start from above, but I should start also from below. And so from below is, I might ask questions like, well, if this is true, then how would this look like in reality? So you have 4 tests that we have for worldviews. Now, I don't know them off the top of my head. I have my computer over here, and I've got all these screens left and right. But rationality is one of them. Experience is another one. Application is another one. I forget the 4th one. But when it comes to rationality, there is nothing about the laws of logic that explicitly or implicitly supposes that or negates the existence of God. So logic does not negate the existence of God. When you look at application, now you might get into a little bit more of reality. Like, go with Buddhism. Buddhism says that the reason why there's evil in the world is because there's desire. Okay. If that's true, then you have to explain to me why it is that the little girl was ran over by a drunk driver if she did not desire anything because she was a good practicing Buddhist. She still experienced evil. So that makes no sense. And again, I'm simplifying it, but just to try to drive the point home. If you argue from the perspective of Islam, for example, in Islam, it gets even more complicated because Islam then goes into this unicity of Allah, right? Because a lot of Islam is kind of, in some ways, is similar because it borrows from Christianity. And so then you have the unicity of Allah. But then if you have the unicity of Allah, then Allah needs to create. And if a God needed to create, then guess what? He's not God. And so that's another way in which that might be a logical problem there. And then you also have the Islamic dilemma, which is that in Surah 3 and in Surah 10, there's these passages that say that if you want to know that, Islam is true, then you go back to the Bible and you'll verify that these are true. Well, guess what? The Bible negates the veracity or the truthfulness of Islam. And if a Muslim were to say, well, but the Bible's been corrupted, then you have a problem, because then Islam is making a claim that Allah's word, that God's word cannot be corrupted, or even worse, Allah is saying you can confirm the truthfulness of this with a corrupted source. So it's busted anyway you try to fix that one. So Christianity, if it is true, let's say if it's not true, let's just go with that. If it's not true, then we still have a problem. We have to define evil. We have to define not just evil by definition, which is the part that I wanted to get to, but why is it binding? Why is something binding? Not simply evil, but why is it binding? Um, so let's see, where are we at over here? In the reality is itself probability. How can you be sure anything exists? Greek philosopher George's 5th century. But you see that this question here, if you started from below, like I was talking about, instead of from above, you might get someone like, what's his name? Descartes. And so maybe you've heard of Descartes. Descartes, he took away the metaphysical. He said, okay, let's not start with metaphysics, right? Let's not start from above. Let's not start with this set of presuppositions. Let's start with the self. Let's start with epistemology. And so he did an epistemic search, and he wanted to find out, how do I know that anything is real? In today's layman's term, it would be, how do I know that I don't live in the matrix? And so that's where we get that whole phrase of cogito ergo sum, right? Like, I think, therefore I am. But what does that mean? So he started saying, well, how can I trust my senses? Because in his time, anything that was true, and which is actually, the materialist's position, that which I can touch, smell, see, taste, and hear, that is what is true, right? Only those things are true. Well, if that is what is true, then how do I know that my senses are not betraying me? And how do I know that I'm not being lied to by my senses? So I'm going to close myself off of everything, and I'm going to start thinking of my thoughts. And so how do I know that no one is trying to lie to me? And so what Descartes did is, he actually, in his own mind, he was thinking. He was like, well, I know that I'm thinking my own thoughts, and that no one is thinking these thoughts except for me. And I am not trying to trick myself or suggest that I'm trying to play a trick on me. Like, and so wait a second, I know I wouldn't be doing this. And so in my own mind, I know this. And if I know this in my mind, then I know that at least I am real. And if I am real, then how can I be here? And so it cannot be that I exist in and of myself without God's existence. And so if God does exist, right, he must exist then. For that reason, he must not want to lie to me in the same way in which I would not want to lie to me, because of who he is. And so then that's the extent of my knowledge. Like I said, I'm not a philosophy major, but I think that I did do justice to Descartes on that. But this argument, like I said, was debunked. And the card probably did a better job than me, for sure, 100% for sure. But I'm doubting, therefore I'm thinking. Yeah. Let me see. Hold up. Let me go back a little bit. Islam is the Arabic adaptation. Actually, so I teach Islam, and it's one of the subjects that I teach. It's to the Muslim, and I'm just noticing here that the comment got cut off, but I can see the rest of it in here. Islam, let me just read the whole comment. Islam is the Arabic adaptation of Judeo-Christianity. Christianity is the adaptation of Judaism and Greco-Roman mythology. Well, that is an oversimplification and flattening of truth. And so let's just begin with which one do we cut? So Islam. What is Islam? Well, if you know that Islam comes about, 7th century, like 600 and so. Right, so this is well after Muhammad is in his. He's already been a merchant for a few years. He had been married to his wife Khadijah for a while. He went over to the desert, but we know that part of the story. Well, he was a merchant, and as a merchant, he traveled a lot of places. And Mecca was notoriously known for having sent, or rather, anyone who had any kind of doing in Mecca that came from the West that were Christians. It was because they were fearing that they were going to be murdered because of their heretical positions on the doctrine of the Trinity and so on and so forth. This is when the church and the state were together. It was a terrible time. This is why I'm not a Roman Catholic, but whatever. So let's just put that one to the side for a moment, and let's just kind of hone in on this. So the people that are living in Mecca that are Christians and the Jews that are there, just about everyone is doing idolatry. And the people that are living in Mecca, a lot of them were Coptics. And Muhammad had a lot of conversations with Coptics. In fact, many of the biblical, not biblical, many of the accounts of Jesus, in fact, the accounts of Jesus in the Quran are from known Gnostic writings of his day. So we know that these are false gospels that he got stories from. And that to me is like, well, it's obvious that you're doing an amalgamation of whatever is happening in your day. And also, it was in his day. He was trying to gain notoriety, and he wasn't getting notoriety. So he did what most people would do that wanted some respect, is he actually practiced monasticism. He, it was going out into the desert, try to, break it until people will be surprised by you. And again, I'm oversimplifying it. But Islam takes a lot of Christian characteristics because of the heretical Christianity that was in the time of Muhammad. But that's that. And so you might say, okay, well, that. Now, why wouldn't a Christian say that? Why can't I say that about Judaism? Why Christians, they take from Judaism and Greco-Roman world. And so, listen, when I read that, Christ came at the right time, he really did come at the right time. There's a word in Hebrew that is said a lot of times in Hebrew that is also in the New Testament in Greek that cannot translate well into English. And in Hebrew, the word is yeshrei. That's the first word in Psalm 1. Yeshrei ha'ish asher, and that's blessed is the man who, okay, in the New Testament, that same word, blessed is the man. So that would be makarion. And so that is where we get the Beatitudes from, right? Like the Matthew chapter 5. So many times when people read that word blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stand in the way of the sinners, nor sit in the seat of the scornful. Okay, that blessed. People, the reason why it's hard to translate is because that word isn't doing it justice in English or in Hebrew. Or in Greek, they don't quite make the same amount of sense as they did in Greek and in Hebrew. So this word is best understood as the word flourishing. Like flourishing is the person who delights in God's word, etc. Why am I saying that? Because the time in which Jesus comes in, he is bringing in, he is colliding with two worlds. The Greco-Roman world was a virtue-centered world. And the Hebrew world was a world that, what was the word? It came from the opposite angle of this virtue-centered world. But it was almost like there were mirror images of the same subject. And so all the words that are recorded in that time, or not just the words, but like the fact that Christ comes at that specific time is incredibly astounding. Like we've lost the understanding of it. And so why is it that Christianity, and I know that I went on a rabbit trail there, but why is it that Christianity is not just simply like a cop-out similar to how I was just describing Islam is trying to do with Christianity? Well, for starters, you can't have the New Testament without the Old Testament. And the Old Testament actually confirms everything in the New Testament. If you look at Isaiah chapter 53, Isaiah chapter 53 talks about how he was wounded. Let me look it up over here. Isaiah 53. Let me look it up over here. And let me see why this thing here is. Let me see. Okay, let's look up Bible. I'll put Bible over here. And I know that I got to do a setting over here. There's something going on in my settings. Okay. Come on, Bible. There you go. Look at you. Properties. Window. Capture. Isaiah. No, not window capture. Let's do it like this. There you go. Look at that. It started working. Okay. So it says this. 3, where are we at? Here we go. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth, like a lamb that is led to a slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shearers. So he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment, he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living for the transgressors of my people, to whom the stroke was due. Okay. So, but the Lord was, I'm just going to skip over here now for any other reason other than just because I want to make a point. And no one wants to hear me read the Bible. But the Lord was pleased to crush him, putting him to grief. If he would render himself as a guilt offering, he will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the good pleasure of the Lord will prosper in his land. And so as a result of the anguish of his soul, he will see, and it will be satisfied by his knowledge. The righteous one, my servant, will justify the many. So when you read something like this, or when you read, let me go to Psalm 22, for example. If my computer lets me now click, it's not letting me click, of course. Wait, let it wait. And it's okay if it kind of crashes out. Come on, don't crash out, you. I'll look it up over here if anything. Psalm 22. What is it? Bible Gateway. Good old Bible Gateway. Well, for whatever reason, it's just deciding. I'll just go ahead and exit this page. Reload. There you go. Psalm 22. Some random ad. And look over here. Everybody knows this part. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus quoted that, right? At the cross. And so people say, oh, God forsook Jesus. Gosh, my English right now is not doing its best. If you keep on reading, you would find something about who he is. And I'm just going to read it right here. But I am a worm and not a man, a reproach of man and despised by the people. All who see me sneer at me. They separate with the lip. They wag the head, saying, commit yourself to the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, because he delights in him. See that they're mocking him. Yet you are he who brought me forth from the womb. You made me trust when upon my mother's breast. Upon you I was cast from birth. You have been my God from my mother's womb. Be not far from me, for trouble is near. For there is none to help. Many bulls have surrounded me. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. They open wide their mouth at me as, watch this, check this, as ravening and a roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue cleaves to my jaws. Let's see. For dogs have surrounded me, a band of evildoers have encompassed me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. All of these things are statements that are said hundreds of years before Jesus, and only Jesus is the only one who could actually do this. Yes, there were people that came before Jesus to have claimed to have resurrected. We know those. There's a story of Horus, right? Everybody knows that Egyptian story, except it's not exactly the same thing. And so I've heard that statement saying, oh, but it's just a copycat religion. It's not, but I would encourage you to read the book Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Sean McDowell. It's a great book. There's no Trinity in Judaism is the pushback that I'm getting in here, right? There's no Trinity in Judaism, right? And so, well, on 2 points, that conversation will be anachronistic. One, the word didn't exist right? So the word was invented in the year 200 AD. Tertullian invented the word. But is there anything that can even come close to the idea that that we might get an aspect of God being triune? Is there in the Old Testament? Well, the answer is yes. The answer is a most definite yes. But how do we get there? See, you're not going to get a inductive reasoning through one argument. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to grab, imagine that you're going to look at a puzzle, and you have all these pieces about what God has said about himself. And what God has said about himself, here, let me kind of put this over here. It's kind of driving the camera crazy. What God has said about himself in every different aspect. And is there anything that might let us consider that God, although he says he is one in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, he says, "Hear, Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad," right? And so how is it that he is one and yet he is three persons? And so obviously, is there anything that might let us to think that? And so, yeah, the answer is yes. So we have in Genesis chapter 18, for example, it's a simple example. You have three people that are coming over to Abraham. Let me pull it up over here. But like I said, you're not going to argue this from one or two verses. You're going to have to do like an exhaustive search to try to find out what exactly we see about him. And so here in this passage, look at the beginning. It says, "Now the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting. Okay, when he lifted up his eyes, behold, three men were standing opposite of him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth. And he said, 'My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass your servant. Please let a little water be brought to you.'" So like these little passages like this, where you see that there's the three and the one. Again, it's yeah, let me look up the word, oh Lord, or Lord. What is this word in the Hebrew word? Would it be the word Adonai? Would it be the word Yahweh? I would doubt it would be the word Yahweh per se, because it's not all caps in here. But he's talking to three, and then it kind of comes to one again. That's one little argument. Jesus is Paul calls him the wisdom of God. And so there are moments in the Old Testament where there might be an attribute of God that is meaning one description of God that it kind of like pertains its own personhood. It's almost like it's its own person. So when you start getting into it, you actually start getting into some fascinating stuff, like in Proverbs. I'm sure you've heard of Proverbs before. Proverbs, it's one of those books in the Bible that people oftentimes they read it quickly and they don't think about that. But I'm gonna put it up over here. Bible. Look over here. Wisdom. God is wise. So this is the attribute of God being wisdom, right? Wisdom shouts in the streets. And then wait a second. It says she. Now this is given personhood to wisdom. So now wisdom, which we know that God is ultimately wisdom, now is given personhood. And so don't be tripped up by the word she over here. Like if you're going to say God, she. This she is related to the word wisdom. The word wisdom in Hebrew is the word hokmah. Hokmah is a feminine word. And so it would only be appropriate that, if I'm saying wisdom, like in Spanish is sabiduría, right? So la sabiduría, there's no way to translate that into English. It's just wisdom is a neuter word, right? But now here it goes into wisdom, no longer an it, but now a person lifts her voice in the square. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. At the entrance of the gates in the city, she utters her sayings. How long, O naive ones, will you love being simple-minded? And scoffers delight themselves in scoffing, and fools hate knowledge. And so you keep going, and you read throughout all the Proverbs. And I believe, is it Proverbs 30? Let me see if it's Proverbs 30. I always forget. Because Proverbs 30 is written by somebody else. It's written by Agur, son of Jacob. So it's not written by Solomon. Let's see. Son. Here we go. So there it is. Surely I am more stupid than any man, and I do probably something anyone wants to quote. And I do not have the understanding of a man, neither have I learned wisdom, nor do I have the knowledge of the Holy One. Who has ascended into heaven and descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fists? Who has wrapped the waters in his garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name, or his son's name? Surely you know. And so you see these little arguments like that, they kind of highlight, wisdom was a person, but now, God. And then Paul says, well, Jesus is the wisdom of God. So you have moments like these in the Bible. So that's why it's not the same thing. But let me see. Let's see. We got burnt offering 420. Let's see what burnt offering 420 has to say. He says, Deuteronomy is the best book to show why Jesus wasn't the Messiah. He definitely, He definitely fulfilled Deuteronomy 13, 1 through 5. Again, one of these, let me kind of put this back away here. The reason why many people like to kind of go at it. Now, again, I didn't go live to start debating people. Like, I'm asking you to ask questions for the sake of wanting to know. But if you want to argue, that's fine. I'd rather you be here than be somewhere else. But let's see, Deuteronomy. Oh, no. We're going to get him. Deuteronomy chapter 13. Here we go. Let's go ahead and put it. Where is it? Bible. There you go. Okay, great. Oh, of course, and the thing froze. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes true concerning that which is spoke to you, right? So that passage is the one where, like, if it comes true, then he's of me, and if it doesn't come true, then go ahead and let him, kill him. So, if Deuteronomy 13 affirms that Jesus was not the Messiah because of Deuteronomy 13, then you would have to argue against the resurrection itself. And so I know you're saying, oh, the resurrection never happened. But just humor me for a moment. So Jesus makes a certain amount of claims before he is crucified. He says, these things are going to happen. He claims in John 8, he says, before Abraham was, I am. He claims to be God. It's a clear beeline. The people that were listening to him, they definitely knew what he was talking about. So what happens? He dies. If he stays dead, good. That means we shouldn't have to hear anything he has to say. He doesn't stay dead. The resurrection matters. It matters because everything he said was then approved by God the Father. See, had he not resurrected, then Deuteronomy 13 would have actually covered the basis for Jesus. But everything he said was approved by God, and that's why he resurrects. Now, the question about the resurrection, how do we get to that? Well, I mean, there's too many arguments to demonstrate the resurrection, but I'll give you the easiest one. Many people think that it was, to argue against the resurrection of the Bible is, the resurrection of Jesus is like arguing an uphill battle. And I'll tell you why. Because the Bible is not shy at making the disciples look like a bunch of cowards. Peter ran away. Peter cursed at a little girl. I mean, these are not things that you want to be remembered for. So when in Matthew, at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, it records that there were guards guarding the tomb. And when they found out what happened, when they were telling the Jewish leaders what happened, the passage says some of the guards went and started, they went over and to try to figure out what to do. It doesn't say one of the two guards, right? Sometimes people, they look too much at VeggieTales and stuff and they think, oh, it was two guards on skirts and stuff. They're guarding this thing with their lives because that was the common thing to do. And all of a sudden you have people that were cowards running away to now becoming courageous and like dying for what they saw. I mean, it's, to me, how do I explain it? It shows how little critical thinking has been given to the actual accounts of what happened. If it's multiple hallucinations, there has never been a moment in all of history where multiple people hallucinated the same thing, ever. Science has never been able to, even come to that. They robbed the body. Well, there's a problem. If they did in fact rob the body, you got to tell me how a bunch of cowards are going to walk up against a bunch of Roman soldiers, whom, by the way, Pontius Pilate his job was on the line. Like, his neck was literally about to be slit by Caesar because of the problems that he was having in Jerusalem. And so, do you think that he didn't want to keep things in track and in order, and trying to keep the people at peace? I mean, the most known man in all of Judea had just been killed. Do you think that they're just going to think, oh, whatever, he just got killed? Like, this was a big moment. They're going to guard this thing with with everything. So if they stole the body, then you got to explain how a bunch of cowards are going to now all of a sudden, kind of run in and rush in and do this. And they win nothing for doing this. Like, they win absolutely nothing. What's in it for them? It's not like they went on and claimed riches. They lived poorly, to the ends of their days. Each of the disciples is recorded in church history as having been brutally murdered in one way or another. So, I mean, you have to kind of weigh in all of that. But then here's an easy way to know if Jesus resurrected. I mean, have you ever heard of this thing called the church? How do you think the church got started? If you think the church got started in 385 AD, you're sadly mistaken. You are missing hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of history, all because you want to say, oh, it didn't happen. So that's not the case. Instead, what you have is multiple attestations, multiple moments. And I mean, people saw him alive. I mean, even before we had the Gospels written, well before the Gospels were written, you have Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15, one of the earliest creeds. This is the way that people kind of kept passing on information. It was through creeds. Why? Because they were watching out for all these Gnostics and people that were coming up with all other kinds of conspiracy theories, as right now on the chat. But the truth is that all of these were put to the test. And what came up time and time again is the fact that Jesus is, in fact, not dead, but he did, in fact, resurrect. And so that's what ends up happening. And so all of these problems that you have are actually easily debunkable. I mean, it's demonstrably factual that this happens. Now, you could say, no, I don't believe that. Well, but that's on you. You're being the detective who's saying, I'm not going to take this evidence. I don't accept that evidence. And if you're a detective that is saying, I don't accept the evidence, that doesn't make you a good detective. It just makes you really bad at wanting to know the truth. I get it. You don't want it to be true because you probably want something else for yourself. That was true for me, and I'm sure that that's probably true for every single person in the world. Those who don't want to submit to Christ, it's because they'd rather be submitted to themselves, to their own glory. I want to be the one who calls my own shots. Okay? If you want to call your own shots, then this is what ends up happening. Every single one of us has totally rebelled against God, and that comes at a great cost. You don't put the price, he puts the price, because he's holy. What you and I get to do is we get to say, okay, well, I want to have it my way. And God says, okay, you can have it your way. Judgment. And that's that. But God, knowing this, He sent his one and only son to do this very thing that I've been talking about. And he resurrected, demonstrating that he is God, so that you and I can have eternal life. Now, I'm sure you've heard that before. You've heard it 1,000 times because you probably live in America and you've heard the gospel message presented. But I would encourage you, like the Gospel of John writes, come and see. Like, Jesus doesn't bypass your intellect. Like, the most intellectual thing you could do is actually want to go into this. And so to just discard it because, I don't know, like, you just want to discard it. Like, how do I say it? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, well, what part doesn't make sense? To me, it's more ridiculous to have an incredible amount of evidence, an incredible amount of people, generations after generations. I mean, you know more about Jesus in history than you know about any other person in the world. So it's just, to me, it's just radically inconsistent when an epistemic inconsistency to try to say, well, I'm not going to believe it because I don't like it. But that's just, you're making a choice. It's like the same thing, like you're a detective saying because the person has a certain skin color or a certain age or a certain demographic, I just know that the person is guilty. I know that they did it or that they didn't do it. And so that's just crazy. So all of these claims, like all of these little claims that you're seeing in here, all of these claims that you're seeing, all of these different claims that you have are, whenever you have a historical figure in Roman mythology and Greek mythology, oftentimes what ends up happening is you're trying to give attestation to why some of the things are, but even the very Greek mythologers, like all of those stories that you know them from the poets, even they are inconsistent in the way that they explain these stories. And so it is not like, look, I want to put this one. Poseidon walked on water. Let me put that. Do you know why that claim is significant to say that Jesus walked on water? Because in his day, everyone would know that no one can walk on water. That only God can walk on water. Why would anyone care about walking on water other than you see Peter walking on water, right? Well, no, it's not just Jesus, it's Peter. Yes, of course. And it was that very same God who is enabling him to do so, and yet he is not believing. But why is that? Why is it that Jesus is able to walk on water? Well, because he is God. So that claim, let me see with my hand over here. This claim, this chat over here. I'm gonna look at this one, the one at the bottom, because I got one at the top and one at the bottom. That claim that Poseidon walked on water was obviously to claim deity, right? It was to claim the possibility of being able to control the waters. So when Jesus walks on water, he is showing that he really is able to do this. And so it's embedded in the mindset of the people that someone that can do that is God. Now, you and I both know that if you ever saw someone walking in the middle of the ocean or in the middle of a lake on water, you would say, obviously, after you discard all the David Blaine stuff and you would go, this is all that magician stuff, you would obviously, if you're there and you say, well, there's no magic carpet here, like this is you're actually doing this, you're God. If you actually were able to see that, like in reality, you with your own two eyes, you'd be like, this guy's God. So that's the thing. But again, and I think that I just answered this one. Let me just kind of click it again. I like the little animation. Boop. It isn't though, but I think that I just did a good job at explaining why it wasn't. But look, the part that we are going to be challenged with isn't that one is the adaptation of the other. The part is, are you actually going to consider the evidence, or are you just going to continue to argue? See, I'm not arguing with you. I'm showing you the evidence. Now, you could do with it what you want, or you can just keep, typing away. But I'm telling you, man, like the best thing you can do is be a good detective. And instead of having made a decision, instead of saying, well, I just don't think it because I don't think it because X, Y, Z, because, well, look, Your Honor, the reason why I know that this guy did it, let's say that someone with, let's give it, what color could I give? This person with pink skin, right? Someone who doesn't exist, right? This person with pink skin did it is because the people, or green skin, let's even make it even easier. This person with green skin did it, the act of murder, is because 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 100 years ago, I heard that there was a guy with green skin that did the same exact thing. And so the moment that I saw this person, I knew that this person was guilty because the other person had done that. And so you see how that is just a fallacy. That is, what is the name of that fallacy? I think it's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, where it's that, you're trying to put, you're shooting at things and you see that it lands somewhere, and then you put a circle around the hole, and then you say, look, you see, right on target. And so that's what all of these possible arguments do. Now, I appreciate you guys asking the questions. Let me see over here. Look at this one. Well, objective ethics. If I haven't presented any evidence, claims are not evidence. It is true. I don't have a cross right here. Like what are you categorizing as evidence per se? Are you saying that I need to actually physically bring down Jesus here? Is that what you would claim to be evidence? Are you saying no? I would need to. Let's see. You know what I would need to know? If God could speak, and if He can make it known to me, and if He can make it known to me in a way that I could trust, and if He can make it known to me in a credible way, and in a way that can be tested, in a way that can be reasonable. Huh. Have you ever heard of the Bible? So, the claims, quote unquote, that things that I mentioned is historical evidence. It's not just claims, my man. There's a reason why there's a whole body of literature, and there's a whole body of people that have come before you and I that have actually gone to the sites. I mean, and they have done it. So this kind of argument, you haven't presented the evidence, brother, claims are not evidence, is the same kind of, I'll point it back at you. And so a claim is a claim. A claim is to say God is not real, and that's it. That's a claim. But instead, what I've done is I've presented historical evidence, logical evidence. I've not presented an actual body, right? That's obvious. I've not performed a miracle because miracles definitionally are rare. And so how could I produce something that is rare? That makes no sense. So then you have to kind of take it with what it is. And so it's the same thing that you would do if you were at a court of law. I mean, if you're at a court of law and you have an attorney who's prosecuting and an attorney who's defending, I mean, at the end of the day, the evidence is going to be, well, look at the data, look at the dates, look at the stuff, and this happened and that happened. And then you look at the witnesses and then look at the camera footage and look at the records and look at all this stuff. And so that's what you would do. And so you have a Bible, you can grab it, you can do this yourself, you can study it yourself. I don't have to bring you here all the library of all the things that are. This is stuff that's already out there. I mean, the challenge for you is going to be, if you're saying I'm not accepting that as evidence, then again, you as the detective have said, I just don't care. And if you as a detective don't care, then you've shown your hand. You've shown that you really don't care about the truth. You just care about whatever you're doing. And that's a sad thing, is that, man, you're not being honest. Because if you were honest about this, then you would actually stop and consider this. Now, I know none of the words that I'm saying are going to convince you, but I would at least challenge you to encourage you to just think about what you're saying. Consider what you're thinking about. Nothing that we claim to believe as followers of Christ, to use your words, claim to believe, comes absent of evidence. And so You like, for example, when you read a science book, it's not like you say, "Whoa, show me the evidence," right? Like, I mean, dude, they're showing you the data, they're showing you stuff. Like, there's people who have done the work, and so why are you putting that kind of burden on me if you don't even put that kind of burden on yourself? You don't even live by those standards. So, to me, it's preposterous that anyone would say you haven't you haven't shown any evidence. It's all claims. All you've done is you've shown that you don't know the difference between historical evidence and physical evidence, right? And so that, or empirical evidence, right? What is empirical evidence? Evidence that I can measure, evidence that I can weigh. Well, how do you want me to weigh the hundreds of people that died before me? How do you want me to weigh that? Have you heard of church history? How do you want me to weigh that guards were guarding the tomb with their lives? And by the way, we have people living in the time of Jesus. Josephus, he records knowing about Christ, and there's interpolation that we know of. That, I mean, some people, I don't know how they fall for this, but there's an interpolation. Someone added in Josephus's writings that that Jesus was the Christ or whatever. Obviously, Josephus didn't believe that. He was the son of the high priest. He could not of the high priest of the day that Jesus was crucified. So he was very close. He lived in Jerusalem. He was very, very close to the accounts, and he rightly records the movement of the Christians, and he was writing specifically because he wanted to be in good favor with the Roman emperor, and so, which was, by the way, the thing that historians would do. They would want to be on the right side of the emperor, and none of the records in the Bible, in the New Testament especially, hold the emperor at all in good side, because they're saying, nope, Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. And so you have way too many things going against it. So you would have to explain the evidence of the existence of the church. I mean, you've heard of the church, right? You've heard of her, right? She exists. There's believers. There's been believers for the last 2,000 years or so. You would have to explain how it is that we got here. And if your claim is, well, that's because in Theodosius, he made the Christianity the religion of Rome, and well, hold up. So what about the 400 years that came before that? And then what about all the other people that had lived in Africa, that the gospel had already gotten there in Africa, like way before, that had nothing to do with the Roman Empire? What about the East, who couldn't care less about the Roman Empire? I mean, what are you talking about? So obviously, your argument will be a claim without an evidence. But, but here's a good one. This is a good one. I don't know the historical evidence for Jesus outside of the Bible. So I love this question. I mean, or rather, I love this. This is a good thing. I actually get into this a lot. So, so you might have good mentions of Jesus outside of the Bible. How do I say? There's different ways of mentioning it. It's what is it? It's useful. It's highly useful, and then not useful at all. You have in the Talmud, for example, in the year 500, there are writings about Jesus, but it's in the year 500, so it's too far removed. So it's of little advantage. We can't take any advantage of it, but it's enough in the Talmud for us to understand the Jewish understanding of Jesus in the year 500. And in the Talmud, it records Jesus as being this guy who, this rebellious magician who, with his many tricks, was getting a bunch of Jews to follow him. This is written in the year 500, but this was the sentiment of the Jews already for a while. So it's not that it is an accurate description of Jesus, but it's definitely helpful to know what the Jewish thought was of Jesus. Or you have, the Quran, right? The Quran is also not useful. Why? Because it's like 600 years removed, and I'm not going to get into it. I already mentioned it. It's got way too many problems. Then you have some evidence that might be of some value. So the ones that I just mentioned are of little value. This one is of some value. And there's this guy. There's this historian. What's his name? I forgot. But he mentions Crestus to the Roman Empire, and so he talks about this guy named Crestus that everybody follows. Now, Crestus was a popular name already by the time that he writes by the Christians, because people would use Crestus in relationship to the name Christus, right? Christ. And so he records the movement of the Christians, and because they follow this guy named Jesus. And so, I forget the name of that historian. He was a Roman historian. And then you have Tacitus. And then Tacitus, he gives a better account of what was going on to the Roman. He's the best Roman historian ever. And so, best attestations that any historian has ever given is to Tacitus. And he talks about the Christians, how they followed Jesus, and where the movement started and how it got to where it got to. And even before then, like I said, you have Josephus, who's writing, right around the year 70 AD or so. Again, really close. And these are people that, these are statements of high value that are not in the Bible, that are against Christians, to try to help you understand. But just because, and this is important that you understand this, just because I'm saying this, that doesn't negate that the gospel is truthful. See, or that the gospels are truthful. Like to say that, how do I say this? To say that the Gospels cannot be trusted because they're making the claim about Jesus is so emphatically wrong. I mean, that's to say any time that anyone is going to make a claim about what they have tried and tested for themselves to be true, that you can't trust that because they wrote it and because it's in their best interest that it be true, quote unquote, then, I mean, think about this. You can't trust history books. You can't trust science books. You can't trust anyone. You can't trust anything. And you don't even live your life that way. So, that'd be ridiculous. So to assume that the Gospels cannot be taken seriously because, of course, they're writing about Jesus, like they're historical. Of course they're historical and they're historically accurate. I just gave you evidence outside of the New Testament. And I'm not claims like somebody just mentioned a moment ago. This is something you can read on yourself. These are names you can look up yourself. And that has already been tested. And just because I didn't bring a Talmud in here to show it to you doesn't mean that it's not there. But anyway, so so there's that. Then you have then we get into some more serious stuff, because then not only do you have the New Testament, but you also have church history, and just as early as 125 AD. And again, I wish I were looking at this in front of me. And this is all just coming at me. There was a guy named Aristides. He records, he writes to the emperor. He writes to the emperor about why he needs to give himself over and be a Christian. And he appeals to the ethics of the Christians. The Christians were accused of a lot of things in the year 125 and even before. They were accused of being atheists, right? Because they wouldn't worship the pantheon of gods. They were accused of being cannibalists because they would eat the body and drink the blood of Jesus. And most notably, it was because sometimes people would go to these church groups, these little church gatherings, and they would get all freaked out about all these different sayings. They're like, oh, those are the crazy ones. Oh, they eat the body and all that stuff. And so similar to how you guys are doing right now, some of you guys that are kind of like asking, but making like these negative, like not negative, but I would say. And so instead what they would do is that they would, in the same way, instead of actually leaning in and trying to understand, they would mock and they would accuse. And so, of course, they were accused of that. And so, for example, in the day, here's another reason as to why they were frowned upon. And they thought that they would say they would eat the babies of people, that they were cannibalists, that they would eat babies and children. Why? Because you had moms who would who would give birth and dump their children and let them die. And so these little babies would be adopted by Christians. to be their own. And so then they would say, oh, well, they eat the flesh and the blood. Of course they're eating babies. They're going over to the dumpsters and stuff to get the babies. And so they're eating babies. So you have that Aristides calling over to the emperor saying, hey, you need to consider this. And you have Irenaeus of Lyons in 150 AD. He compiles a whole thing of heresies in his days. He writes his collection called Against Heresies, and he talks about like 80. He compiled a list of 87 or 88 different Gnostic positions on the Bible, God, Jesus, etc. And all of these things are also historical. So just because you are in the position of doesn't make it less historical. That's all I'm trying to say. But I gave you positions that are against it, and they, at the very least, point to the veracity of a man named Jesus who lived in Judea in that time that we know the Bible talks about, the New Testament talks about, and pinpoints it to a person living in the time of Pontius Pilate, like Tacitus records, like Josephus records, and some of the claims that the disciples made, like Tacitus reports, and like Josephus reports. But is that any help for us? Of course it is. It at least lets you know that it wasn't invented in the year 2022. So this isn't COVID, right? Let me see. Let me put this one over here. Matthew copied 600 verses from Mark. Okay? Yeah. Matthew was well versed in Mark, and yet he gave his own account of it. Doesn't make it less historical. If you see a series of events, like if I were to, okay, let's just put this in reality for a moment, Immortal Beloved. And I appreciate these comments, by the way. Immortal Beloved, I don't know how the latency is in here. Were you alive during 9/11, 2001? And if you were, I'm gonna just kind of wait it out over here. Maybe that'll probably let us know how far the latency is. I'm gonna go ahead and say the answer is yes. You're 21, not 32. Oh wait, no, never mind. You guys are talking amongst yourselves about something else. Jesus resurrecting was a big deal, but I wasn't alive then. I was alive in 2001. I exactly know where I was September 11th, 2001. And I'm pretty sure that I could talk to 5 different people that were alive the same year that know exactly the accounts. And had there been only our accounts and nothing else, forget the footage, forget everything, that moment is so vivid in my life. It's so vivid that I can tell you the accounts of what happened on that day almost hour by hour. And that phenomenon is true for a lot of people today that were alive in 2001 during the attacks of 9/11. So if I repeat the same words that someone else repeats, that doesn't make it less true. So I don't know what the problem is in there. There might be what I would find more challenging would be if even if there weren't, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there are some slight quote unquote discrepancies in the gospel writings. Let's see, like Judas, how does he die? Does he die because he hangs himself, or does he die because he his guts kind of fall out and he falls into a pit, or however the passage says? Well, which one is it? And so then you start asking, well, wait a second. They got that one wrong, so that means you can't trust it. Or that's actually what an investigator would want to look at. Well, wait a second. When you're looking at a scene and you're asking 4 witnesses for questions, if the story lines up perfectly, someone's cooking up something. But because the stories don't line up perfectly, that's how you can paint the picture. So the detective would have to actually do something called harmonizing, which is where you would try to see, well, how many was it? Was it 2 or was it 3? Was it or like one gospel account says that it was 2 angels that were at the tomb, and then another gospel account highlights that it was only 1 angel at the tomb, right? So which one is it? So sometimes I tell students this. Imagine I'm writing and I'm recording about this classroom, and I start saying, well, in my classroom, there are, I was teaching Mr. S, and I was teaching Mr. C, and I was teaching Mr. A, and we were talking about subject X. And that's a terrible story, but just for the sake of the conversation, because I don't want to give real names out or anything. But at the end, I would say if I'm recording, so Mr. Pelagi ended up talking to Mr. S, Mr. C, and Mr. A about subject X. If that's all you have, you would say, oh, so Mr. Pelagi only has 3 students in his classroom, or no, those are the ones he's highlighting. That doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of other students there, because then, Mr. E might come into the room, or he might actually write a different report and say, oh yeah, and Sarah asked a question. It's like, oh, Mr. Pelagi was lying all along. He didn't tell the full record. It's like, well, no, this is what I highlighted, and that's what he highlighted. And so if the record that Mr. E or whomever says is slightly different than mine, it just kind of builds the whole thing together. And you wouldn't think, oh, no, they're making it up. No, it's when they're precisely exactly the same thing is when you would start thinking, sounding a little fishy over here. But yeah, I mean, Mark is there's 600 lines. I don't think it's 600 verses. It's 600 lines. Verses and lines is a little bit different on the count. That are almost identical. And I say almost because they're not exactly identical. Notice how Mark is lesser in length, and at the same time, his accounts of like the guy that was possessed by a bunch of demons is longer than in the other account, and so that's on purpose. And so that's because Mark is highlighting something different. See, when Mark writes, Mark is writing to an audience that is not primarily Jewish. That's why when you get to Mark chapter 7, he's explaining things like the customs of the Jews. Like, this is the ceremonial washing, and this, by the way, this is what this meal meant. So you see these parenthetical comments that he will make to try to help his audience understand. Whereas Matthew, he's writing to a Jewish audience, which is why when he starts the accounts or the genealogy of Jesus, he gives the accounts in an order that would actually resonate with his Jewish audience. He actually dives deeper into some more Jewish symbols than Mark does. Luke is fascinated by something else. He's writing to someone named Theophilus, and nobody knows who that guy was. People think he was an official, a Roman official, but nobody actually knows who he was. Some people think that it was Paul's attorney. I mean, who knows? But what I do know is that Luke is writing for a different purpose, and so. And then when John gets in the picture, John tells us in chapter 20, he says that the reason why he's writing is so that you could believe that he is, he is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God. And so that's why the word believe is often stated and highlighted over and over and over again in John. And so that's why. And so I don't know why the confusion is between like looking at the apparent discrepancy when you can harmonize in any other setting. I don't know why there's kind of like this inclination to say, no, this is not true because I feel like it's not true. And so that to me is where I would say is wild. Let's see. Let me put the comments in here. I think Jesus lived and preached as a practicing Jew and wanted to be the Messiah, but the Jewish leaders saw him as a rebel and had him killed. That is all. Kelsis, thanks for that comment. You know who also believes that, Kelsis? You're not the only one. The Jews believe that, right? That's why it's in the Talmud, they record him as such in the year 500 AD. They record him to have been this guy who actually just wanted to, he was actually a magician. He was wanting to trick people and stuff. But sometimes just the human side of it all. Let me see. Let me just put it back up over here on the screen. Wanted to be the Messiah, but the Jewish. Let me see. How can I make this smaller? Let me make this a little bit smaller so y'all can see it. There you go. Now y'all can see it. And rebelled and had him killed, and that is all. I mean, I'm sorry that you feel that way, Kelsis, but I wonder if, do you want to hop on the line? We can talk. I mean, it's totally cool. I'm not gonna. This isn't a place where I embarrass people. I don't want to embarrass anyone. I don't want to debate anyone. I'll be open to having a conversation with you and trying to point you in the right direction. But you're not the only one who feels that way. A lot of people feel that way. Let's see. I've got this one right here. This is way too many. Move, I got this. Way too many hidden prophecies of Jesus all throughout the Old Testament. Yeah, that is a statistical conundrum to try to fulfill all of those prophecies. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to lie to you. I can't do math to defend myself. My daughter is doing math. She's going into second grade, and I mean, I could do second grade math. I can do first grade math, but sometimes I see her doing those addition and subtractions. Like, yo, like this girl's fast. Anyway, I say this because I don't remember the name of the guy who did the statistical analysis, but I mean, the claim is, and I want to use the word claim, not the word evidence, because I don't remember the name of the guy, but the statistics of being able to fulfill only 8 prophecies is 1 in 10 to the power of what was it? You know, I don't want to butcher it. I don't want to tell you the wrong number, but just to fulfill 8 was a number that was astronomically high. It was so high. I remember this, that you have a higher chance of winning the lottery every day from the moment you're born to the moment you die than to actually fulfill 8 of those prophecies. So he fulfilled more than 8. He fulfilled over 300 prophecies. The number for having fulfilled 1 in, how many did he fulfill? It was to fulfill 70 prophecies. It was 1 in 10 to the power. I just remembered it. It was to fulfill 8 prophecies is 1 times 10 to the power 17. That number is so big you can't even comprehend it. I mean, let me see if I can put that over here. Come on, my little notes. Yes. Of course, this little thing is going to be ridiculous. And let's see now. Notes. There you go. All right. You guys can see that. So 1 in 10 to the power of 17. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this number is wild. Okay. This number is wild. To fulfill 1 in 8 is that many. 1 in that many. To fulfill 8 prophecies. That's the study. I forget who did it, but you can look into this. To fulfill 70, it was 1 times 10 to the power of, I don't know what it was, bro, to be honest with you. But the number was so great. It was well over to the power of 40. It was well over that. It was to the power of 72 or some crazy number like that. See, it's so late in the day for me that I'm forgetting these things, these data points. But this is just to know this. You can fact check me on this. So 1 in 10 to the power of 40. If that already is a mathematical impossibility. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that, like, to fulfill a certain amount of prophecies, just a small amount of prophecies, is such an impossible number. And yet what we see in the scriptures is that he fulfilled not 8. In fact, he fulfilled 20 in one day. He fulfilled 20 while he was at the cross. So that to me is just another kind of point to be like, well, how could that be? Because it had to have fallen perfectly. I mean, down to the Magi visiting him. Like, that's such an obscure thing for him to have been visited. It's like in Psalm 72, I think it is, where it says that he will be visited from the east with gifts of gold and frankincense. I mean, that's where they came from. Magi, we know they came from the east because Magi is a Babylon. It's a Persian word. It's from Babylon. That's where the word for wise man comes from. So we know that they came from there. So, and then what's wild, and this is the wild thing. This is a crazy thing. In Babylon, they practice Zoroastrianism, and guess what they use as their, like, what do they read? Like in Zoroastrianism, the stars. And so then you get into a whole nother mess, right? Because you got these people who have been trained in Zoroastrianism and in Jewish literature. Why Jewish literature? Well, Daniel was the head of the Magi at some point when, Nebuchadnezzar had made him like the head of the Magi over there. And so we're talking hundreds of years before, of course. But you don't think that would stay and resonate? Of course it would, at least the heart. I mean, we're talking about people that lived by tradition and died by tradition. So they went on and to explain to King Herod, where would he be born? And, well, according to the scriptures, he'd be born here. And so we got to go. And so, of course, it's all these little tiny things that they just have to be too perfect. And it couldn't have happened after the destruction of the temple. It had to have been just before. It had to have been just right at the perfect time. I mean, it's just too perfect. Way too perfect. Let me see. So let me see. So all y'all that are on the channel right now chatting, I appreciate you guys being in it, but it's really easy to hide behind the keyboard and type some of the stuff you guys are typing. But the real challenge is going to be whether or not you're actually going to put it to the tests. Because just remember this, you have someone who is taking the time to actually try to explain to you, hey, this is not just something that's made up. This is going at it. Like I told you, I'm being flat out honest with you. I don't remember the name of the guy off the top of my head. I don't have like I mean, these are the books that I have behind me. Some of the books that I have a library in my office of books that I've read, but I mean, I have nothing to gain in this other than hopefully just one of you guys would just slow down and think about this. Your position on this so far has been, move, I've got this. And you're saying that I'm making claims, but the claims are backed up by evidence, whereas your claims are just sharpshooter fallacies, Texas sharpshooter fallacies. So, let me see. What is this? What is this? Let me read some of these stuff. There are no hidden promises. Yeah, to you. Let me see. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate your objective ethics, but objective ethics, I don't know when I'm going to plan on doing this again. I would love to set up some time with you and chat, but objective ethics, might I encourage you in the time being, just before you go, if you're still in it, just take to heart what I'm saying to you. Like, really consider this. If you are a solid investigator, you're going to investigate to the fullest extent. The bias of the investigation is going to have to be considering all the data, considering all the evidence. So far, none of the questions that have come up have been questions that I haven't asked myself, have not been questions that I've tried to seek out for myself, have not been things that I haven't even doubted on myself. All of these things that have been mentioned in here, I've thought of, heard of, tackled in one way, shape, or form. And it'd be easier to just say, no, I got to shut up and I got to put that away. Kind of like be that moniker Christian that, says, just the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. But, Jesus doesn't even call his disciples to do that. I mean, Jesus doesn't call his disciples to bypass what they know to be necessary for evidence in order for you to know what to do next. So why would I expect that of anyone else? I'm telling you, hey, the evidence is there. Like, all you have to do is look for it. Like, all you have to do is actually, but you got to be honest. Because you can be dishonest. You could say, I don't want it. I just care more about me being right. And, I've heard these arguments said by a couple of deconstructionists, but I haven't actually done the work myself. And so a deconstructionist might tell you the same 5 points that they'll always argue. And all of those points that they have, unfortunately, are fallacies of appealing to ignorance. Like, I just can't see why good God would let this happen. That's a fallacy of appealing to ignorance. I just can't see demonstrates appealing to ignorance. And so might there be a way why God would allow that? And logically, the answer is yes, there might be a way. Now, do you have to know the way? No, of course you don't have to know the way. And so you see, but has God demonstrated in any way? Of course he has. And so then you look at the scriptures and so on and so forth. But it's very dishonest to say, I want to know nothing of this because it doesn't, because it's not true. I mean, that's not being an honest investigator. But I appreciate you kind of, coming in and letting me know these things. I would encourage you as you're continuing to watch, nothing that I'm saying in here is to try. I saw somebody here putting, I know what gaslighting is. Where was it? I think, was that you, Objective Ethics? Let's see. Let me put this one in here. This one's good. This is a good one. 40 years after Jesus died, the Israelite nation was taken out by the Roman Empire. From that day forth, they have not done animal sacrifices. Yes. Come on. Now, I'm looking at this over here. Move, I got this. I think Isaiah. David said in Psalm 23, they pierced my hands and my feet. No, that's Psalm 22. That's Psalm 22. Not Psalm 23. Hey, man. Objective Ethics, do me a favor. Why don't you send me an email? Maybe we can actually do like an actual podcast. I record a podcast with my co-host Iggy every single Monday, and we release them on Thursdays. Now, we can have a conversation. I'll look you up and stuff, but send me an email to contact@pursuingfaith.com. I would love to, you have, your handle is Objective Ethics. That's fantastic. I love that. I would love to know how you got there, because you've been, let me see. There you go. It was me. That's funny. I like that. But you stream every Sunday. Feel free to stop by at any time, brother. I would love to stop by as well, and maybe we could do something together on a Monday. We could do through what's that called, Riverside. So like I did with Taco Talks. Taco Talks is a great friend. Well, great. I say great. We only met once, but it's like once you meet a friend on YouTube, you're like friends forever. Even if you stand on the other side of the aisle, it's always good to have a friend online. And so, but yeah, man, I really appreciate that. And, but I wonder if there's anyone in here who has been listening to all of this and is a Christian, but has been wrestling with a question, that they just don't know how to handle. And so they're going back and forth on this. And so they keep at it and nothing makes sense. And so I wonder if there's any single one of you guys with that. And so there's just so many things going on in the world right now that kind of move us into a direction that instead of wrestling with God, we just kind of shy away from God. I mean, I've seen guys that have gone to seminary, have gone and done so many things in life and have experienced some disheartening realities, and then for for them to then walk away completely is it's sad. It's really sad. I mean, there's a lot of people that unfortunately they did not wrestle with God, but they just kind of walked away. You know what I like about God is that he calls his people by his name, and he says to Jacob, he says, your name shall be Israel. And Israel means it means, depends on how it has a double meaning, but it means wrestles with God is one way of naming it, and God prevails, right? So it's a play on words. But I think that the better thing for us to do as followers of Jesus is to wrestle with God and not to run away. Let me see. What do we have over here? We got, the wrong one. There you go. Yes, I'm a moral realist. Morality is objective. No gods needed. I always try to have respectful disagreements and debates. I love it. Well, objective ethics. I would love to have a conversation with you. I would love to see. So from a presuppositional perspective, you would have to argue how you get to that. But I don't think we're going to do that in here unless you call. And that's okay. Maybe we can schedule something later just to try to understand the other side and of the equation, because I've also tried to wrestle with it. I mean, that's kind of like Immanuel Kant, in Kantian philosophy or Kantian ethics, claims that there's a way for you to get to absolute ethics without the need of God. Is that your position in there? Objective ethics? Are you more like Kant or Nietzsche? What's the other? Soren Kierkegaard. He was the father of existentialism. All right, that's as far as you get me on on that stuff. I've read them, but there's no way that I'm gonna pass on telling you that I'm not like the expert on those subjects. I've just read them enough to know them and understand their arguments, but not to quote them. So, guys, I mean, whatever is bugging you in relationship to knowing God is crucial. Now, again, these are good comments that were given. This is good conversation coming in. I'll tell you more about myself. So in the meantime, as we're getting more comments and stuff coming in, so I'm a pastor. I'm not the only pastor in my church. In fact, we have a team of pastors. And I'm a bivocational pastor. I used to be a full-time pastor. Now I'm a bivocational pastor. I'm a full-time teacher. And I'm part of this channel over here as well. I joined this channel last year. Iggy had it running with his wife. Iggy is a professional rugby player, or used to be a professional rugby player. He retired. He has a business. He has multiple businesses. And so he's an entrepreneur, and he became a follower of Jesus a few years ago. And he started this podcast with his wife. Then his wife couldn't keep up with the podcast because she has other things going on in her life. And so then I sort of came in as a friend and as a guest, actually. And then we became friends. And I was like, you know what, let's do this. And now we're starting to do these Ask Pastor Mike Anything. And I would highly encourage you to follow the channel. And then, just here's what we like to do in the channel. We like to give gospel truth and gospel clarity to the current world. So we don't shy away from the problems. Like in the last episode that we just did, we were talking about why no one trusts their pastor. And we talked about some of the data that's been released and stuff about that. And it's really sad, but that's just the truth. I mean, people don't trust their pastors, and just like people don't trust their doctors anymore. Like when I go to the hospital since COVID, like my trust ratio with doctors used to be like up here, and like progressively it's gone down here. Not that I don't believe that doctors haven't done their studies or anything, but it's just unfortunate. I mean, like this is kind of like the aftermath of stuff. And so I know that in our current age, with all the scandals and things that are happening in the church, I know it's easy for, people to like say, well, I just can't trust the ethics and morality of a pastor. So I get that. And so we talk about that. It's the latest episode that we did. But I mean, anyone in here that has any questions related to God, as a follower of Jesus, or not as a follower of Jesus, I would just ask you kindly. One of the things that I don't do is I don't want to. First, I don't shame you. I'm not going to be sarcastic against you, or at least not on purpose. This is an honest conversations. You can have a disagreement with me. You can have a disagreement on this. That's totally fine. This isn't a bait and switch type stuff, but if I'm being honest with this, I want you to be honest with this. And so you might have a position on your whatchamacallit, on your side, and I respect your position on your side, but I would encourage you, be like a good detective. A good detective always wants to consider all the relevant data. And what is the relevant data? Is all of the evidence. And so you would never, and I've said this already a few times today, a good detective wouldn't say, I just don't believe this to be true because I don't want it to be true, or I don't consider this data to be true. I don't consider this to be true. And so it's like, why not? Well, because I don't consider it to be true. And so, that's circular reasoning, or just because it's kind of sounds like what someone else said about something else. That's false. Or not false. That's fallacious. That's illogical. That makes no sense. I mean, you wouldn't say, Your Honor, the reason why I know this person who happens to have green skin committed this crime is because someone 100 years ago committed a crime that had green skin. And so I know now that when someone does something like this, it's because, this person did it because I know the person then did it. And so that's crazy. Like you wouldn't grab evidence and say, well, you wouldn't do that. So this is what we do with half of these arguments is we're latching onto something that sounded like it was the case, but it's not the case anymore, or it sounded similar, and so therefore it makes it the same. And so that's absurd. But let me see. Hey, thanks a lot for the sub right there. It's always wrong. Let's see. What is this? Let's click this one here. What does that say? It's always wrong. That is the moral truth, no matter who agrees with it or disagrees with it. Hey, I appreciate you, Aventura, for saying that I'm killing it. Morality. Yeah, morality is based on wisdom. Morality is based on God. It's based on His character. Morality isn't based on feelings or preferences. I had a conversation with somebody who said that evil is basically that which I don't prefer. It's that which is not preferable. So like, wait a second. What do you mean that which is not preferable? Preferable to who? To the person? To the society? To the individual? Well, what collectively we have decided it's not preferable. Well, what if I decide today that something is preferable? Well, but we've decided that it's not preferable. We've decided? Who let you decide for me what is preferable to me? And so, and then he moved on and said, well, that which causes harm to others or to self. And so that wouldn't be preferable. Well, hold up. What if I want to cause harm to myself because I would prefer to cause harm to myself? And the argument moved to, well, but the doctors and people have looked at and nobody actually wants to hurt themselves. Like, well, wait a second. You don't know what I want and don't want. So the argument falls on its face when you make it about preference. And so, amen. Let me see. Let's put this over here. Everyone reading this, please repent and believe that Jesus came to save your soul by dying on the cross and rose from the dead so that you can be redeemed and be born again, sealed with the Holy Spirit. Amen to that. I want to go ahead and just kind of let me highlight that again right there. Yes, 100,000% amen to that. That is exactly right. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That is a big, bold truth claim. By him saying that, he's saying that all other religions don't lead to God, only him. That he is the way. He is the truth. I mean, truth is a person. Truth is objective. And so he is that very object of truth. And he is the life. That means anything outside of him leads to death. Anything outside of Christ leads to a lie. When it comes to wanting to know God, anything outside of Christ will lead you to a lie. And so I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me is precisely the heart of this. But I know that many of us have questions. And even a truth claim. Truth is offensive. I mean, no one wants to be told that they're wrong. No one likes to hear that they're wrong. No one accepts to be wrong. Why? Because if I'm wrong, then that means I've been wrong for such a long time. And what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? Right? And so ask yourself that question, because not to throw Pascal's wager at you, but just think about this for a moment. Like, if I'm right and you're wrong, you have way more to lose than me. But if I'm wrong and you're right, then I've got nothing to lose. At the end of the day, I'm living a better life because I'm living a pious life. I'm living a life that, that is devoted to wanting to do that which is good, true, and beautiful. And so I'm living life on purpose, with purpose. I want to bestow certain ethics onto my daughter. So if I'm wrong and you're right in the sense of you being an atheist, then I got nothing to lose. But if I'm right and you're wrong, you've got everything to lose. So you're fighting an uphill battle trying to prove to me something that I've tested myself. And so instead of making this debate back and forth, I encourage you, ask the question that you as a follower of Jesus, but again, maybe you're not a follower of Jesus, might be wondering, well, I believe in God, I believe in all that, but man, I just really struggle with this. And we're cool with that. We're 100% cool with that. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with this. It comes from God, but debating an atheist based on morality shuts their disagreements down. I got to come up with some nice little sound effects over here maybe the next time that I come up. Well, man, I really love this, Yeah. Let's put this one here as well. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Listen, the best thing you could do is humble yourself and just ask yourself this. Look, I am disagreeing with all of these Christian claims. I'll ask you this. If you are struggling to be a follower of Jesus, I'm going to go a step further. If you are saying, I just can't see myself being a follower of Jesus because of all the Christians, look at all the garbage that they come up. I mean, you start naming all the, you put the list, all the bad guys, put them out there. They're all fake. They're all hypocrites. They're all this. They're all that. Go ahead. Do that. That'd be the equivalent of saying, I just don't like Mozart because every time I've heard someone play it, they play it poorly. It's like, what? So that is the same kind of logic. So what is it that you don't like? Is it that God is calling you to surrender yourself? Is it that is there something that you see in the logic? Maybe you've heard an argument so much you haven't tested the argument. Are you willing to test the argument? Are you willing to test your position? I'm willing to test my position. I'm willing to do it all. I'm online right now. I'm doing this, but I didn't do this to debate people. I did this to help give answers to people who are actually having legitimate questions. And I'm sorry that I'm not being as fast as I can with the comments. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't. And then I see like a batch of comments kind of like pop at once. Maybe it's my internet connection. But I wonder if one of the things that we have to consider as people is if we could just slow down. Could we slow down and say, am I memorizing a bunch of buzzwords, a bunch of little arguments that I maybe heard, I don't know, Richard Dawkins say once. Maybe I heard some deconstructionist somewhere say once. You know that sarcasm is not a source of evidence. Like scoffing at the evidence is not a good source of evidence. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put this over here. Dangerous thing to do is to judge Christianity based on the people who claim to be Christian. And yet, I've done it. I'm a pastor and I've done it. There was a time that I didn't want to be a Christian because of the Christians. To quote the famous theologian Kanye West, what have you been hearing from the Christians? They be the first ones to judge me. Now, of course, we know that Kanye West is not the best theologian in the planet, but I rest my case. That's the popular opinion, is that many times that's what we get. We get a bad rep to Christ because we ourselves are not doing good. Maybe if we could go back to Aristides' days when we could actually pull to the attention of the emperor and say, just look at the ethics of the Christians. But the thing is that there's just so many different ways in which people are There's the name it and claim it. There's all those kinds of gospels out there. And so then people don't give themselves to Christ. They just give themselves to their desires. And then they just kind of put a little cross. Like, I don't know if you could see. Let me see if I can move the camera. There's a cross right there. That was a gift. Someone gave me that cross. And I hung it. It's cool. Okay. But that's what people do. They kind of hang it, and then they put a little Jesus bumper sticker in their bumpers, and then they cut you off, and so then it's like, had to be a Christian, of course, and so that's what happens. I gotta put this one in the chat. Let's see. I suspect many of these atheist influencers are getting money from Democrats because of Christian nationalism. So just like the Democrats, they only gaslight. Okay, we can talk about Christian nationalism for a moment. I think that Christian nationalism is not a good thing. Now, again, I'm American, and I am pro-America. So I certainly want our laws to be enacted. I certainly want borders to be protected. I certainly want things to go orderly. I certainly want like good moral ethics to happen in our country. So I'm not gonna tell you that that I don't resonate with some of the messages and stuff. But the problem with nationalism per se is that nationalism is I'm gonna say Christian nationalism is it stems from this idea called closed exceptionalism, and so then many times when you're a Christian and you say, well, I'm praying for our country, and I want the best for our country, and God first and all that stuff, people unfortunately they misunderstand that to mean that they want when I say people, I mean in general. The first argument will come, freedom of religion, but people will quote a separation of church and state, but they don't know what they mean when they say that. They just hear the word God and a politician saying that, and they say, separation of church and state. So, but anyway, I don't hold to the notion of close exceptionalism. What is it that makes America exceptional? It's not because God has chosen America to save the world. That's the heart that stems in. That's the avenue that goes into Christian nationalism. You could be a Christian patriot. Christian patriotism is different because a patriot actually would support our current president and say, I support the president. And then when the president says something dumb and something really, really bad is done by the president, you call him out and you say, you shouldn't have done that. I'm glad that, we have a president that does this, but I can't stand behind that. And so that's what makes you a patriot. And so that would be open exceptionalism. And so as a Christian, you ought to want your country to be doing well. You ought to want the common good for all people in the country, and the government has the right to defend their borders and all that stuff. But unfortunately now it's kind of become this misnomer that if you're a Christian and you're pro-America, then now you're a Christian nationalist. And so it's kind of become this smear tactic that Democrats have given. It's kind of like the things that they gave Trump. They called him a Nazi. They called him all these things, and it just kind of goes on and on and on and on. And I don't want to kind of keep going about that, but yeah, I've done a couple of episodes on Christian nationalism myself, Aventura. I see it over here, it's sad because here's what Christian nationalism is doing. And I'm going to give you a real world application on Christian nationalism, how it's wrong, right? So earlier on the video, I don't know how late you tuned into this. I don't know how long you've been watching this. I was talking about how I went just last week. I got back like last Saturday. I got back from a mission trip that I did in Tennessee went over there to minister to these families. But here's what Christian nationalism does. A Christian nationalist looks at a Muslim moving into the country, because we have seen what happened in the UK, right? The UK, there was an influx of migrants that came, and the culture shifted too rapidly for the UK. And what happens now is that you have people that love God, right, and love America, and they walk up to a mosque and they say, we don't want you here, go back home. And that's Yeah, I can't stand behind that. But because that's a response from fear. But so instead, what my daughter and I did is we went to Tennessee. We went over to try to reach out to these people. And what we ended up learning is that a lot of times, especially these guys from Afghanistan who moved over here, I mean, there's a population of 4,000 Afghani refugees living in Nashville, Tennessee right now. And so there's a lot of people coming in from over there alone. Anyway, so when people practice Islam in their countries, in their Islamic countries, like most of them are doing it out of culture. Like in Afghanistan, they speak Dari. They don't speak Arabic. When I was talking to some of the people that were with me, they told me, well, the only Arabic that I know is from the Quran. So that means they don't know Arabic. They just know how to quote certain passages from the Quran because of the kind of same reading. It's like if you today, because you know how to read English, and you picked up a Latin book and you started reading Latin because it's the same letters and it's read phonetically, you could say to me, I read the Bible in Latin. I'd be like, cool. Now, what did that say? It's like, was he like, I don't know. And so for them, a lot of it is cultural. And when they get to the States, when I say them, I mean Muslims moving in here from like Afghanistan and these other countries. They move here and they've lost their friends, their language, their community. The only thing they have is their religion. And so then the missionaries that I was partnered up with in Tennessee, they explained to us, because the missionaries, they used to be Muslims. And so they became Christians, right? But what they explained is that for the first couple of years, it's very typical when a family moves in here from one of those countries to double down on that faith. And when they are encountered by a Christian nationalist in America, what ends up happening is that they are found to, the comments that they heard from their friends in their countries, they find them to be true. You see that they don't like you, they don't want you, and so you got to protect what you have. So when a Christian who also wants the welfare of his nation, of his country, as a good patriot, but is first and foremost a Christian, sees a Muslim, the response isn't, let me slap a cross in front of their face and tell them God doesn't want you here, or you would have to actually want to befriend them. Because here's the thing about actually winning over someone who was raised in Islam. You could never do it by a bunch of propositions. There's this guy named God Logic. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. God Logic does a great job at debating, these Muslim kind of like top dogs or whatever, and puts them to shame and stuff. And there's no offense to God Logic, but unfortunately, I think that he is more preoccupied with wanting to prove Islam wrong than wanting to win Muslims over. He could call me on that. He could hop on the channel. He could tell me what his strategy is, and that's cool. But if all we do when we reach people that are different than we are is accuse them, attack them, and then we're not showing them Christ. So that's what I mean, Oh, this is Johnny. Like, I had no idea. Johnny, it was you the whole time. Johnny, for those of you guys who don't know, is our producer. So he was like, yeah, we've done some episodes on Christian nationalism. Bro, I didn't know that was your handle. Come on, bro. Give me a break. How could I know that? Let's see. Let me see. What do we have here? We got Objective Ethics back at it. It says, it's always good to find common ground. Christian nationalism is a dangerous agenda. Freedom from religion is extremely important. So there's a difference between saying freedom of religion than to say freedom from religion. So to say freedom of religion means that the government shouldn't, let me kind of put this in here. And by the way, Objective Ethics, you really have to kind of lean in with this with me for a moment. Only the Christian worldview actually allows for this to be true, and only the Christian worldview. But in when we talk about freedom of religion, what is freedom of religion? That every individual person has the freedom to worship whomever, however they want, so long as, or rather, first of all, without fear of harassment from their peers or from their nation, so long as they also don't harass and infringe upon other people's rights as well, right? So it's kind of like the package of freedom of religion. By the way, this is freedom of religion is actually a Christian value, because Christians in true Christianity is not about making and demanding that you become a Christian. That would be that's the opposite of what the Bible teaches. So you have to follow Christ. Like you how do I say this? You have to give yourself over to Him, and so you have to surrender and give yourself over to Him. But that is you. It's your choice. Although we can get into the semantics of God's sovereignty and human responsibility, at the end of the day, no one is forcing anyone to believe. That's why Theodosius is called to make Christianity the official religion of Rome, and forcing everyone to become a Christian was the most dumb thing anyone could ever do, because that's not the heart of Christianity. Anyway, so freedom of religion is that you're free to worship whomever, however, without fear of harassment from your government. Freedom from religion is a whole different package. To say freedom from religion is an absurdity, and I'll say why. Because to remove the notion of the Christian worldview that is at the bedrock of the West, you would have to supply it with something else. See, there's an ethic that comes from the Christian worldview that is only of the Christian worldview. So, like, even Immanuel Kant, right? Objective ethics. Even Immanuel Kant, he was born in a Christian world. I mean, he knew Christian ethics. He just wanted to do it absent of God. But it's really easy to do ethics when you're in third base already when it comes to matters of ethics and morality, having been blessed in a world that demonstrates morality to be essentially Christian. So if you erase God and you try to bring in materialism, then you're going to have a harder time defending materialism. But whatever, let's not get into that. To say freedom from religion is to remove a belief system. That's all you're saying. But we don't operate without belief systems. All of us have belief systems. You have a belief system. I have a belief system. Everyone has one. So the question is, which one works best? And how do we know that? So that's why we can say that as a Christian, you can vote people that have like-minded values as you. But but I'm totally against Christian nationalism. So I'm glad that we found some stuff over here. I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out again to Johnny. Johnny, by the way, if you guys don't know, Johnny is our producer, and he's hopped online over here just checking it out. And he is he's about to have a baby in a few weeks, and so I'm sure that you're watching this at 1 a.m. is making you just that much extra happy for sure. I mean, it's let's see. Oh, someone's agreeing here with God Logic. Let's see. I agree wholeheartedly. God Logic doesn't focus on sharing Jesus and bringing people to the cross. He focuses on intellectual debate. He found a nail and he just keeps. There's a set of people that have come before God Logic, and it's not just Sam Shamam or Shamum, however you say his name. There are people that came way before him. So you have probably the first apologist that to Muslims from the Christian world was probably that I can remember is John of Damascus. John of Damascus, he lived in Damascus. He was the chief bookkeeper when the Caliph had just taken over Damascus. I mean, he was part of that. He was a Christian. his family, his dad was a governor, and then like the Muslim Empire kind of came. Muslim Empire. Sometimes I say things, but the Muslim wave came in and they took over, and so he wrote a book. I forget the name of the book, but in it he talks about how to actually talk to Muslims, and so he gave like a 3-step approach to talking to Muslims, and the first step was that you really have to know what you believe, and I'm just giving it my terms, like the way that I understand it is, you have to know what you believe, then you have to know what they are believing wrong about the Bible, and then you have to tell them what they believe and why what they believe is wrong. And so that approach was invented by John of Damascus, and that's actually something that God Logic uses today. But there was a guy that came in the 1800s who was known for wanting to prove Muslims wrong as a missionary and not actually making followers of Jesus. But yeah, and that's 100% true. We can't force someone to be born again. Only God can do that. Forcing them to go through the motions of Christianity is only something that Rome would do and has done in the past. Yeah, and it's one of the sad moments of church history. Yo, Johnny in the hood over here. Johnny in the hood. I mean, I believe it, Johnny. I know that some people do come. I mean, so it is true, bro. Like, I don't want to throw shade at God Logic. I'm just saying that maybe God Logic has his avenue, and so some people watch God Logic, just like people are watching right now over here. And that what ends up happening is we have people that watch God Logic, and then they become Theo bros, where like now they want to go arms blazing or guns blazing against Muslims instead of actually being being who God has called us to be. So it's good to know arguments, and if someone wants to go on a powwow, like it's good to have a powwow. God Logic, I mean, he's excellent at what he does, and I know that I might be kind of like a little bit more over the edge over here with him, because he is he's actually he's doing a good work. It's just his work is not being evangelistic in nature, if that makes sense. So yeah, and then let me see what I got over here. We got Republicans aren't forcing anyone to be Christian. The Bible needs to be put back into schools. I mean, bro, why wouldn't we have the Bible back into schools? I mean, we're wanting to put books with, in the previous administration, they wanted to put books that were demonstrating really, really nasty images to children in elementary schools. I mean, we wanted to bring people that have, unfortunately, a perverse view on what it means to be a man or a woman, and so they're wanting to, like, that's literally the definition of indoctrination. There's nothing wrong with putting a Bible in any school. I mean, the first textbook that any public school had in America was a Bible. So I mean, right now it's just this, we live in this kind of planet where it's like, oh, if you have a Bible in the school, it's like it's sin. Like, it's a blasphemy sin against the country. Bro, like, dude, like, it's okay to, like, it's okay to have a Bible in the school. Like, chill out. Like, if you can have a Quran in the Bible, and if you can have a book about, critical race theory, then you can have a Bible as well. Like, shutting out a certain book because, oh, it's religion. Guess what? Everything is religion, because everything is a belief system. So, and then this one here, let me see. You cannot have freedom of religion without allowing freedom from religion. True, yeah. I guess you have to allow freedom from religion. I shouldn't, at the same time, I shouldn't want to force anyone. Like, the government has no right in forcing you to be a Christian. And if you want to believe in nothing, then that is your right. You are absolutely right in that. That's absolutely 100% your right. So notice how the Christian worldview will respect that. But the atheistic worldview, as far as I know, the materialistic worldview, there is no argument that defends the atheistic worldview in allowing freedom of religion, because every single atheistic worldview that has had the government for 10 seconds has murdered people for being Christians. I mean, just think about Russia, think about China, think about North Korea. I mean, you could say, oh, but those are just communists. Sure, but I mean, they were atheistic, right? And so then you think about, who was it? There was there are some worldviews out there that are atheistic, that are pacifistic, right? Like Buddhism. Buddhists are pacifists, but the problem with pacifism is that then you let the bad guy come in and take over, and so then you're back at square one. So so then they don't work either way. And so yeah, I know there you go. I know that he was talking about banning the Bible. It's not like I wasn't born yesterday. I know that that's what he meant. He's talking about banning the Bible from schools, and any law that seems religious, like pro-life, shouldn't be in the government. But think about that for a moment. I mean, banning the Bible from a school, to me, is the most preposterous thing anyone could think of. But then to say, and again, maybe we can have a conversation about this later, but to say, well, and we shouldn't have people give their opinions on being pro-life, but we're going to allow other opinions to come in, and we're going to say these are good opinions and these are not approved opinions. I mean, if you say that these are good opinions and these are not approved opinions, those are blasphemy laws. So that's already not freedom of religion. So you see what I mean? How only the Christian worldview allows for freedom of religion, but the one who doesn't want religion really doesn't want religion. And you don't bring your Christianity here, that's not for you. Whereas the Christian will say, you could be an atheist and you can come on my channel. You could be an atheist and you can come to my party. But the atheist will say, oh, you're a Christian? Oh, bro, get out of here, bro. And I'm sorry to kind of make it like this, but unfortunately, when it boils down to it, that's kind of like the crux at from the high level. I'm not saying that an atheist and a Christian can't be friends. Absolutely they can. I have friends that are atheists. So I have family members that are atheists, and we love each other, and we care for each other, and we hope the best for each other. So that's not the same thing. So again, I gave you an overgeneralization. It's not encompassing the reality of it all, in all aspects. But that's what happens. And so many times when we have arguments with people that don't believe the same things that we believe, we kind of go into fights instead of actually slowing down and thinking. I wonder if maybe there might be someone in here who has a question about God, who's wrestling with God, and who, for whatever reason, doesn't know what the answer to that is. I wonder if you're thinking that maybe you've messed up a little bit too much and now there's no way you can get back. Maybe you've been a little too dry. What is it? Well, because whatever that is, I'm also here for that. I'm going to give this a couple more minutes. But as we do, I want you guys to know that one of the best things that you can do is when you are questioning God, that God invites you to wrestle with him. Don't run away from it. But now if you're going to mock, then you've already demonstrated that you don't care about the truth. If you're going to laugh, if you're going to mock, then you've already demonstrated that. Look for the evidence and consider the evidence. Look for the evidence in application. Look for the evidence in system. Look for the evidence in well, if this were true, then how would it apply? And if this is not true, then etc. So, but if there's anyone else with any other questions, I would just say, man, actually, I'm gonna come up live again. I'll just do a little bit better job, just promote it. Make sure you leave a sub, you like and subscribe. But I just want to say, to all of you guys who are, let me see, how do I do this over here with this thing? Let's put the call over here. Let's put desktop on. Let me see. Does this work? Come on. This little thing over here has to work. Okay, maybe it'll work now. There you go. So, well, with all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and say it was an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys. I really hope that today's conversations were useful and fruitful, and I just want to encourage you to keep coming back and keep asking questions. My name is Mike. I'm the co-host here at Pursuing Faith Network, and we have a new episode every single Thursday at noon, so highly encourage you to check it out. God bless. See you on the next one.